A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. Effective leadership can pave the way for progress and prosperity. Today, we'll talk about a leader who has been known as the greatest exponent of the doctrine of non-violence, that is ahimsa and truth. He said, I quote, "There is no other God greater than truth, and the only means for the realization of truth is ahimsa." Unquote. Welcome to my channel, Rendezvous with Reena. Today, we will discuss in detail the 5th chapter of FLAMINGO, that is Indigo by Louis Fisher, wherein Mahatma Gandhi helped in securing justice for the oppressed people of Champaran in a non-violent way. Now, who is Louis Fisher, children? Louis Fisher was born in Philadelphia and served as a volunteer in the British Army between 1918 and 1920. He made a career as a journalist and wrote for the New York Times. The following is an excerpt from his book, The Life of Mahatma, and this book has been reviewed as one of the best books ever written on Mahatma by the Times Educational Supplement Notice. Gandhi had confessed to Louis Fisher in Sevagram Ashram about the incident in Champaran that had kindled or instigated him to urge the departure of the British from India. This chapter primarily focuses on the leadership shown by Mahatma Gandhi to secure justice for the oppressed people through convincing argumentation and negotiation. And we also get to know about the contributions made by the anonymous Indians to the freedom struggle. This chapter brings to fore the struggle of the poor sharecroppers of Champaran exploited by the British landlords. Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi had told the peasants to meet Gandhi. Gandhi had recently returned from South Africa after having successfully fought the legal battles for the right of the citizens of Indian origin there. Rajkumar Shukla, a representative of the Champaran peasants, meets Gandhi at the Indian National Congress convention in Lucknow. He requests Gandhi to come with him to Champaran to help fight for the poor peasants who had been cheated by the rich landlords and the Indian lawyers. After an initial refusal, Gandhi agrees to go with Rajkumar Shukla via Kolkata, Patna and Muzaffarpur. So we see, children, that it was Rajkumar Shukla, an Indian illiterate peasant, resolute, helped in bringing Gandhi to this battle. So all praise for this man who indirectly paved the way for massive revolution. Gandhi had not heard about Champaran. Where is Champaran? Well, Champaran is a region which now forms the East Champaran district and the West Champaran district in Bihar, India. It was a part of the erstwhile Mithila in the foothills of the towering Himalayas near the Kingdom of Nepal under the celebrated King Janak. Rajkumar Shukla and Gandhi travelled from Kolkata to Patna and stayed at the house of Rajendra Prasad in his absence. The servants, they knew Rajkumar Shukla because he had been frequently visiting Rajendra Prasad's house because of the peasants' court cases. But they did not know who Gandhi was and what his caste was. So they did not allow Gandhi to draw water from the well, and for the first time Gandhi understood what untouchability meant. Gandhi proceeded to move to Muzaffarpur to obtain more information about the peasant issue. Where is Muzaffarpur, children? It is a city in the state of Bihar. Gandhi had a typical way of working, used to meet a lot of people, derive information from all sources, and keep in confidence those people who were involved in the case. There was a deep involvement and a complete transparency in his way of working. So we see that he had sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kriplani, and sure enough, J.B. Kriplani was there to receive Gandhi with a large body of students. Gandhi stayed for 2 days at the house of Professor Malkani, who was a government school teacher. This was an extraordinary thing. Why was it an extraordinary thing? Because Indians were afraid to show sympathy for the advocates of Home Rule movement. The news of Gandhi's arrival and the purpose of his visit spread quickly. Muzaffarpur lawyers met Gandhi and apprised him about the cases of the farmers in Champaran which they were handling. Gandhi heard the cases, condemned the lawyers for charging hefty fees from the poor peasants, and concluded by saying that where the peasants were so crushed and fear-stricken, taking the cases to law courts was useless. He further said that the real relief for them will be to be free from fear. Let us understand what is sharecropping. Sharecropping is when the landowner allows tenant to use the land in return for a share of the crop produced on the land. What exactly was the problem of sharecropping in Champaran? We see that most of the arable land in Champaran district was divided into large estates owned by the Englishmen and worked over by the Indian tenants. And the chief commercial crop was indigo. So the landlord compelled all the tenants to plant 15% of the holdings with indigo and surrender the entire indigo harvest. And this was done by long-term contract. This natural indigo dye was exported to Germany. But we learn that Germany developed synthetic indigo, and hence the profit declined for the Britishers. And as a result, the landlords obtained agreements from the sharecroppers to pay compensation for being released from the 15% agreement. This sharecropping arrangement was irksome for the peasants, so many signed willingly. Those who resisted engaged lawyers, and the landlords hired thugs. After some time, the news of the synthetic indigo reached our illiterate peasants, and now who had signed wanted their money back. The torture of the British landlords and the poor peasants was heart-rending. They were forced to grow cash crops, and farmers wanted to grow food crops that could be eaten, and the leftover could be used for commerce. Cash crop was solely for the profit sold to the developed nations, and which was an extra income and value just for Britishers. So at this juncture, Gandhi arrived in Champaran. Now, how did Gandhi start his mission of settling the issue of the farmers in Champaran? He first visited the secretary of the British Landlords Association, who refused to give him any information, saying that he was an outsider. Next, Gandhi went on to meet the official commissioner of the Trihut division, who tried to bully him and advised him to leave Trihut division. Gandhi did not leave. Instead, he proceeded to Motihari and stayed there and continued with his investigation. Reports came that a peasant had been maltreated in a nearby village. Gandhi set out to ascertain the situation on the elephant back. On the way, he was stopped by the police superintendent messenger and was ordered to return to the town. Gandhi agreed. On reaching Motihari, he was handed over an official notice stating that he should quit Champaran district forthwith. Gandhi signed the receipt for the notice, stating that he will disobey the order. The consequence was Gandhi was summoned by the court and stated the reason the next day. So consequently, Gandhi remained awake all night and telegraphed to Rajendra Prasad to come with his influential friends. He sent instructions to Ashram and wired a full report to the Viceroy. So children, we have a quick peep into the working of Gandhi, which is sharp and systematic. In the morning, when Gandhi was supposed to appear in the court, the entire town of Motihari was painted black with peasants, thronging from far and near to support Gandhi and see their Messiah. Now children, how do you define morning? Which can be defined as bright with positivity and radiance. On the contrary, we see that the morning is described here as black. Why? Because Gandhi, who had come as a savior for the peasants of Champaran, was now to be subjected to the high-handedness of the Britishers, and which had made the peasants sad and unhappy. So they had gathered outside the courthouse to show their love, support and solidarity for Mahatma. And this spontaneous demonstration was the beginning of their liberation for freedom from the fear of British. The Britishers had subjected the poor peasants to untold sufferings, which had made them weak, subjugated and fearful. But now they had gathered in thousands outside the courthouse, which indicated that started to push the fears down and gather their guts to raise their voice, and this was also a concrete proof of their might and strength. The Britishers till now were dreaded, feared and unquestioned could now be challenged, questioned and retaliated in the court. We see that Gandhi pleaded guilty. He said that he was involved in the conflict of duties on the one hand, and not to set a bad example as a lawbreaker on the other. He wanted to render humanitarian and national service for which he had come. He disregarded the order to leave not for the want of respect for the lawful authority, but in obedience to the higher law of our being, the voice of conscience. So thereupon, the judge released him without bail and said that he would not deliver the judgment for several days. Gandhi then conferred with prominent lawyers from Bihar like Rajendra Prasad, Brij Kishore Babu, Maulana Masrul Haq. Lawyers told him that they had come to advise and help him, but since he would be arrested, they would go back home. Whereupon Gandhi demanded about the injustice to the sharecroppers. Realization dawned on the lawyers and they informed Gandhi that they were ready to follow him into the jail. And since Gandhi was a total stranger and yet was prepared to go to the prison for the sake of the peasants. And on the other hand, these lawyers, who were the local residents of the adjoining districts and who had also claimed to have served these peasants in the law courts, going back home would be a shameful desertion. So Gandhi saw the lawyers had made the cause of the peasants their own. So Gandhi exclaimed that the battle of Champaran is won. Several days later, Gandhi received written communication from the magistrate informing him that the Lieutenant Governor of the province had ordered the case to be dropped. And we see that the civil disobedience triumphed for the first time in modern India. Now, what is civil disobedience? We must understand that civil means ordinary citizens. So the disobedience of the ordinary citizens towards the unjust laws in a peaceful manner is civil disobedience. Gandhi was asked to leave Champaran for no valid reason, and it was a sheer misuse of power and law. And when thousands of farmers supported Gandhi and showed their loyalty to the country, judiciary had to bend. The next development is Sir Edward Gate, the Lieutenant Governor, summoned Gandhi for a meeting to know about the complete facts of the situation in Champaran. Gandhi had 4 procurated meetings with the Lieutenant Governor, and as a consequence, an official commission of inquiry was appointed to look into the indigo sharecropper situation. Commission consisted of the English landlords, the government officials, and Gandhi as the sole representative of the peasants. The official commission of inquiry assembled crushing mountain of evidence against the big planters. And now the big planters agreed to make refunds. But how much they asked, since Gandhi demanded compensation due. So he asked for 50%, but the representative of the planters offered to refund to the extent of only 25%. Gandhi complied at their word and thus broke the deadlock. Gandhi was never contented with the large political or economic solutions. His politics was intertwined with the practical day-to-day problems of the millions. His politics tried to mold a free Indian who could stand on his feet and thus make India free. His was not a loyalty to abstractions. It was a loyalty to living human beings. He looked into immediate and critical problems of the people, addressed the problems at the grassroots level, and strongly believed in saying that if we take care of small things, the big things will automatically take care of themselves. He saw cultural and social backwardness in Champaran villages and appealed for help. He asked for teachers, social workers, and doctors to improve the health hygiene and spread awareness amongst people. So with the result, 2 of his disciples, Nihari Parekh and his wife, volunteered as teachers. His youngest son Devdas and his wife Kasturba also joined him from ashram. Kasturba Gandhi educated the people on personal cleanliness, community sanitation, and since the health conditions were miserable, doctor was appointed for 6 months to treat the prevalent diseases like malaria, skin eruption, and other infections. Charles Freer Andrews, the English pacifist, had become a devoted follower of Mahatma. Gandhi's lawyer friends thought that it would be a good idea for Andrew to stay in Champaran and help them. But Gandhi was vehemently opposed to it. Why? Because he said that the cause was just and they should rely upon themselves to win the battle. And they should not seek a prop in Mr. Andrews because he happens to be an Englishman. And in this way, Gandhi taught a lesson in self-reliance. And we see that Gandhi had confided to Louis Fisher that the Champaran episode was a turning point in his life and political career. What do you mean by turning point, children? Turning point means a critical or a decisive moment when something happens which consistently changes the direction in a better way. So we see that the episode gave realization that the Britishers were exploiting the Indians and draining the country's resource and had to be driven out. So, Champaran episode was an amalgamation of self-reliance, Indian independence, and help to sharecroppers, which contributed towards India's freedom. Hope you understood the chapter well. Thank you.